a reminder. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And
I will review all the recordings.
Yeah, we're going to post it on YouTube and then send out a follow-up email with the links so everybody can get to them very easily.
Great, thanks. Well, does that mean it's time to go? Time to get started?
I'm sure. Do we hear any objections?
I guess the folks who haven't made it into the breakout room yet can't tell us that they're not here, but they can see the recording.
Exactly. They'll come in as you're talking, and we'll just deal with it.
And then we should plan to end at.
I know that Joan and Danielle are supposed to have 45 minutes. I think we'll extend the end of the breakout rooms to deal with this little delay that we're doing.
Okay, well, so we'll just stick to our planned schedule, and if we get done a few minutes early, that would not probably hurt. Right.
Okay, great. I'm going to turn over the floor to Abby and Davida for this wonderful presentation on digital inclusion support.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Jess, and thanks for Aton for having us. And thank everyone for joining this breakout room so that we could see you, and hello to those who are reviewing the recording. We are excited to share with you today a presentation from as a joint effort between NDIA and Ameren Critical Infrastructure. So I am Abby Waldrop, and I work at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance, and I am the Digital Navigator Manager there. And we're going to be talking with you about what digital navigators are. So if you don't recognize that term right away, that's fine. Davida, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Davida Delmar. I am a citizen of the Navajo Nation. I am the Digital Inclusion Manager for Ameren Critical Infrastructure. So I'm a new position. This is like a new effort that we're doing with ACI, which we'll, of course, tell you more about. And here's just for reference, when you go back to the recording or to when we share the slides, that you'll know who's Abby and who's Davida if you didn't already know. So yeah.
So we're going to be talking about the digital navigator model today, which NDIA has a lot of experience with, and an opportunity for tribal communities to receive a grant to have a digital navigator. So that's like a tease towards the end. And we're partnering with Ameren on ICI with this new effort. So Davida, you want to tell us our agenda?
Sure. So first, we're going to just, of course, we're doing introductions and partnerships right now. I'm going to go into why it's a good fit in terms of digital opportunities in Indian country. And then Abby's going to take us through, both her and I, she's going to start off with the digital navigators and just the overall process and history, as well as, the skills and aptitudes we're looking for. I'm going to take over in terms of target communities, the marketing and outreach, and of course, bridging the digital divide in tribal communities. Just going to go briefly over that. And then finally, why we're all here, which is the National Digital Navigator Core grant opportunity that you can apply for and that we hope that you share.
Yes, definitely. So we've gotten in the tease, you know why you're staying around to the end of the presentation, because we want to talk about that grant opportunity. But just to introduce a little more information about NDIA, if you aren't familiar with us, we strive to be a unified voice for all things digital equity. And we do that by learning from, supporting, and advocating for our community of over 700 affiliates around the country. Yesterday, my colleague Camilla Roseras shared, excuse me, about what that means and how we do it. So if you want to know more about digital inclusion generally, go back and review that, certainly. And hopefully that gives you a little context for who we are. But I will just leave it at saying that it is free to join our community. I think it's really valuable for anyone doing any kind of digital inclusion work to be hearing what people are talking about in that community. And it is something that you would make even better by being a part of it. So you're welcome to join us and check out the resources we have on our website for digital inclusion work. And we are starting this new partnership with Ameren Critical Infrastructure to increase our support and resources on digital inclusion and digital navigators, specifically for and in digital or in Indian country. Over to you.
Yes. So hopefully some of you have heard about Ameren, been around for many years. Ameren Risk Management Corporation, or Ameren, is the parent corporation to Ameren Critical Infrastructure. So Ameren created Ameren Critical Infrastructure, or ACI, because it was the right thing to do to address the need for broadband deployment and equitable access to the internet across Indian country. So of course, we're hopeful to bring more broadband resources to Indian country, actually to tribal lands. And this is all designed to bring comprehensive broadband deployment and digital inclusion to communities across Indian country, to Native populations in rural and urban settings. So both contexts. So as the digital inclusion manager with ACI, I'm really excited to partner with NDIA because, of course, they are the folks who have spearheaded digital inclusion. And it's something that we want to partner with because we're helping with the broadband side to bring that to Indian country. But then, of course, there's other ways that digital inclusion needs in order to be successful, such as appropriate devices, and Abby will go into that. But then also, of course, digital literacy and skills. So if you want to learn more, you can visit our website in terms of more work we do. But this is the role that at least my position is going to take part of.
So digital navigators, a word we've already said a lot of times, is a model specifically for one way to address digital inclusion needs for a community. And it was born out of conversations in the NDIA community of digital inclusion practitioners back in 2020, when the pandemic changed our work in two key ways that you will recognize. The digital equity became more critical than ever, and the way we had been doing things before wasn't going to keep working because we were in a different situation with social distancing. So through those conversations, the digital inclusion practitioners came up with this replicable model that's really flexible and has been adapted to a number of different scenarios, and in each case becomes relevant to the community that is implementing the digital navigator model and that is being served by the digital navigator model. Everything we do at NDIA is built on the belief that communities are the ones who know the best what they need and how to create solutions for themselves. And so the digital navigator model follows that. And so we see it look different in every time that it has been implemented. Because NDIA was the one that hosted the conversations to kind of get this model started, and it's kind of our realm to hold a lot of resources available, we are a source for those resources to be in a hub, and that we can continue to share those resources with the community. So you'll find a lot of things on our website. You'll hear people from our organization talk about digital navigators a lot, but it is something that was developed by practitioners for practitioners, and it is completely open source and available to be used. So I know we're going to be talking about one opportunity that you could apply to work with us specifically on this model, and we support a lot of communities that are implementing digital navigators, but just know as we go into the rest of our presentation that you are also welcome to get the resources off our website and run with it and make it work for you and however it does. So any piece of this that looks useful to you, you're completely welcome to use it.
So as Abby said, how NDIA kind of the pandemic helped in terms of highlighting their efforts and seeing the need in various aspects of digital inclusion and everything. And of course, the effects of the pandemic affected Native communities to an elevated level, given their existing lack of resources to basic needs. We've heard stories of students struggling to engage in virtual classroom activities while, based on their reservation, or even to submit homework given their limited broadband access on tribal lands too. So to paint a picture, only 67.3% of tribal lands in the lower 48 states have broadband access. In 2019, we got this from the AIPI. Their tribal technology assessment found 18% of respondents on reservation lands have no internet connection at home, and another 33% of respondents rely on cell phone service for home internet connection, which of course is not enough. It's we see limited access to broadband, but also of course that the appropriate devices aren't always there in terms of their access to broadband. So we still don't know how to access digital skills, or how digital skills have further hindered these various communities. And we see that there's an opportunity to keep, to help build digital inclusion, the digital navigator model, and apply it to Indian country. So, so just so you know that as Abby's talking, we're going to see, even though some examples don't necessarily have specific native examples, we want to ensure that this is the jumping off point to actually applying the digital navigator model to Indian country.
Going around, I was getting tripped up on our words today. So just to say it very briefly, a digital navigator is a trusted guide who addresses the whole digital inclusion process, which we think includes home connectivity, devices, and digital skills with community members through repeated interactions. The model was built to ensure that individuals have support in each area simultaneously, because we know that if someone access to internet, it doesn't mean that they just necessarily know how to use it effectively. You could use some coaching on digital skills, or may not have a device that helps them use that most effectively themselves. So it's a one-on-one model to make sure all of those areas are being stacked into a single program. And so if you're thinking about, we know in a lot of communities, there are parts of this being addressed by different organizations. For example, if you're a library that lends devices, so people have computers at home and they borrow them from your library, that's a piece of the digital navigator program potentially, but adding a digital navigator to make sure that the individuals get all the pieces at the same time is kind of the difference in this model. The one-on-one interactions we think are really important because it's key to success. It's something that we encourage in all different versions of the program that we've seen, even though I said it's very different in every community. We think that community members benefit from having a guide who they can build a relationship with and from whom they can receive ongoing support throughout what can be a very long process to have all of needs met or all of the digital inclusion goals met, so that it's helpful to have the same person being a support throughout the entire process. Being a digital navigator is not a role that requires really complex technical knowledge. It's something that's more empathy based, and we think cultural competency is a really important piece of this, because a digital navigator assesses needs, recommends resources, and then supports a community member in accessing those resources, but they don't necessarily like fix a computer. They just need to be someone who is approachable and can understand and empathize with the person they're working with. So let's look on the next slide at a visual of what the digital navigator process kind of looks like. We'll just walk through it together so you can get an idea of what a digital navigator might do. When a community member is identified as having a need related to digital equity or reach out for support in some way, the first thing a digital navigator does is ask a set of questions in order to assess what their needs are. Once the digital navigator has worked with a community member to complete those assessments, they evaluate and discuss the needs that have become apparent through the assessments. These conversations include learning what the community member prioritizes, how they would prefer to have their needs addressed, and what goals they have, which goals are most important to them, to make sure that the references and the support that is suggested will fit exactly what they need as an individual. So based on those conversations, the digital navigator will recommend digital literacy training, options for affordable connectivity, and devices that might be appropriate for their needs. Even if a client only requests assistance in one of these areas, it's important that the digital navigator will address potential needs in all three areas, which we already kind of covered. You have to have more than one piece of this puzzle to have your needs met. After the community member has had a chance to access those resources, the digital navigator will check back in with the individual to make sure that that resource has in fact met their need, and to see if they have if they need any additional support to access that resource, and reevaluate their level of skill or connectivity or whatever their goal was, to see if they need to return to that earlier step and refer to some new resources based on progress that was made, changes in the goals or situation of the person who is working with the digital navigator. Eventually, the digital navigator will usually complete an exit survey with that individual to collect some data and wrap up that relationship, although it's often the case that a community member will return to the digital navigator to get more support with a new goal whenever their needs evolve. So that's a basic run through of what the process looks like. but we can look now at what you would need to be a good digital navigator, or what you might look for if you're finding a person to be a digital navigator. There's a few commonalities that we've seen across various successful staffing scenarios. We know that sometimes there are employees that are existing that take on digital navigator roles. There might be volunteers that are brought in and trained to be digital navigators, or a new person might be hired just to be a digital navigator. But in all these different scenarios, there are some critical skills and aptitudes that have been identified by digital inclusion practitioners using this model. And they're captured in a baseline job description that you can find on our website. So if this is something you're interested in, you don't have to write the job description. There's somewhere you can start with it there. First of all, we always recommend hiring from whatever community is being served, because that will ensure that the digital navigator has a strong cultural competency and basis of existing trust in that community. They don't need to be an IT expert, which is something we kind of already talked about, but they do need to have a basic understanding of technology concepts, and they should be comfortable enough with technology that they can learn new skills independently as needed. And we know that sometimes when we're trying to help a community member as a digital navigator, there's some learning together that can happen, but the digital navigator should be comfortable enough finding that new information if they need that to support the community member. So rather than seeking folks who have a strong technical background, it's important that digital navigators can communicate with clients in a language they understand, with good humor, and creatively solve problems while providing excellent customer service. So a lot of those skills and the critical skills and aptitudes are sort of qualities of a person. And then we recommend some areas of training for digital navigators to give them the information and some of the skills that they may not come with already. These are kind of the areas listed here on the slide that we usually cover in the training that we provide in DIA, and that we recommend other folks provide if they're doing their own training. We think that digital navigators need to have a good, strong understanding of digital inclusion, so they understand the kind of issues being addressed, the very complicated systems that make it difficult for people to access the internet and use it well and get devices that are appropriate for them. And we also provide some training on data and research about the digital divide in the community that's being served, again, to get a better understanding of where different needs lie and why that may be. We offer strategies for understanding the audience and the needs of that individual, which I understand we have libraries represented here today, so you may be familiar with the reference interview, which is one of the skills that we often teach about asking clarifying questions and getting to the heart of the question that's being asked by the community member. And we also provide some training on finding what resources are available in a community, how those can be most useful. And then last, of course, the evaluation and reporting of a program to track kind of not only the effectiveness of the program, but also what kind of needs are apparent in trends across the community, which can help build a better digital inclusion ecosystem for a community with the help of digital navigators.
Okay, so sorry, I forgot we had a transition between one and us. Okay, so where are digital navigators based? So we believe that community anchor institutions are the best places to house digital navigators. And that's already in various communities right now, such as libraries, healthcare settings, senior centers, workforce development offices, housing authorities, and then of course there's a cohort of digital navigators across organizations as well. And what's so great about tribal communities is we already have those anchor institutions. So tribal libraries, tribal colleges and universities, or TCUs, tribal workforce development offices, Indian centers, they are all the great places to have digital navigators and to house them and to create these different resources as well as events that they can possibly host. So who do the digital navigators serve? So there's various community institutions, of course, that have taken advantage of this resource already. Like I said, we don't have native examples at this point, but for instance, the Salt Lake City Public Library selected 3 neighborhoods with low rates of connectivity and device ownership. The Mass Tech Collaborative targeted unemployed job seekers in alignment with their organization's goals. And East Hartford Public Library aimed to reach K-12 caregivers and adult learners at their partner school system. And how these folks were identified were through the American Community Survey. So this was a concerted effort to find and target areas with the most need, as well as provide these various resources. And as you can see, they're diverse resources. So it's not just library, but like workforce development and other capacities in terms of like education and helping to serve components of the local community that can help, elevate their digital literacy skills. So I think the key takeaway, and Abby already, of course, I mentioned this, is that we can involve existing institutions to bring digital navigation resources to the community. And NDIA has found that community members are the best members to become digital navigators and have the ability to bring all aspects of digital inclusion together, or at least to address all three aspects of the digital inclusion model. And so, let's see. So, okay, so of course, a big part of this is marketing and outreach. And it would be nice to just post this online and like have everyone look at it or do a social media post. But of course, the whole point of digital navigation is that folks have trouble accessing online resources. So offline resources that can help people notify of these great programs is, of course, word of mouth through partnerships, and of course, having your marketing and outreach have accessible languages or be culturally relevant. So this example that was derived from an already existing example, this is just one that we think could be a good model for a Native community, is to have people who are representing your community can see themselves represented in your content, maybe even throw language in there too, that can help people notify them that this is something that is not an external, organization coming in, but something that is bred from the community and that they can help to shape in terms of what their needs are and what technology they would like to have access to. And so here there's a yard sign that can be put out, or there's bookmarks too that you can also take advantage of. And this was really easy to make. If you know Canva, you can make a sign. So, so some other offline methods would be flyers, door hangers, yard signs. You can announce this on in newspapers or radio advertisements, because I know radio is huge in Indian country. So this is just some cool examples to like help you in terms of what does it mean to kind of tell people about this and to let them know that this this resource is in our communities. So in terms of bridging the digital divide in tribal communities, so Indian country has already been making moves to address the digital inclusion. So broadband is being prioritized at the tribal government level by taking advantage of existing funding and grants. So we heard about the tribal broadband connectivity program yesterday, and of course involved in that is the NTIA grants as well. Anchor institutions are working to bring devices to communities. So as stated before, tribal colleges and universities, tribal libraries, community centers are just amazing places to house digital navigators. And then we see the need now in terms, like more than ever, to provide digital tools to help gain access to health, to knowledge, like culture and language. People are relying on that more to learn their native language or to learn more about, or hear stories and from the community, from their elders. And of course, this is a great way to boost your economic development too, because people can start gaining their skills, or they can put their businesses online. They don't have to move to big cities or, do the traditional ways of opening a business, but can actually have a base in their community, as well as have outreach to the greater, outside world.
So I want to provide a couple of suggestions of ways to move forward if you're interested in this model. And the first of those on our next slide is just to find the resources that we referred to a few of them today. This is a little bit of a shorter presentation than we sometimes give, so we didn't talk about all of the different things that are there, but there are a variety of resources from places that have implemented a digital navigator program. They have developed resources and then shared them here. And you can, again, become part of the NDIA community to communicate with those people if you have questions about that. But there are things there you could start using today, like the job description, baseline job description you could edit to make it fit you. So everything is there that if you would like to use it. And then the next slide is the maybe more exciting thing for me to share today is the grant program that we have been alluding to. So we're calling it the National Digital Navigator Core, and it is specifically implementing in either rural and or tribal communities. And I want to be clear that the tribal and native communities would not necessarily need to be rural, which Davida mentioned earlier, but it is from a $10 million investment from google.org, which has come to NDIA to implement digital navigator programs and support digital navigator programs in those communities, because we've seen fewer digital navigators in those kinds of communities. And as we said, we are partnering with Ameren Critical Infrastructure, and Navita is going to be such a key part of this program. So you can learn more. There's a website listed there. We'll also share in the chat in a moment to get some of the details, but I will share some of those details now on our next slide, which has a lot of text. So enjoy the picture and then we'll go to the text one. So as I said, 18 sites will be selected to start their own digital navigator program. And those will be either rural or tribal communities. And at least 6 of those will be in tribal or native organizations. That will provide funding for a full-time person to be a digital navigator in that community for 31 months. It will also provide some funding to support that organization's program and data managers to help compensate for the time that they are spending on the project. It will provide devices that can be distributed to community members, because that is an area that we have heard from people doing digital navigator projects. Having a device to hand out really helps enhance their program and gives people something they can keep when they get the help from the digital navigator that can be really useful for them. It will provide staff training and support from us at the National Digital Inclusion Alliance and from Ameren Critical Infrastructure. So that is training on how to create the program, how to implement the program, how to map assets in your community, how to fill the gaps that become apparent, how to be a digital navigator, and that's ongoing support throughout the 3 years of the project, which includes a variety of online trainings, regional meetings, and then also mentorship from local and regional digital inclusion practitioners. So we want to connect folks with people that are near them that are doing a lot of this work already, so that they can benefit from their experience and knowledge. And again, that's nearby them, so in a way relevant to them. And we will support the collection of data locally and the analysis of that data. So all of the program evaluation, we will help with that and provide back some resources that hopefully will lead to the sustainability of this project. But also, we think this is really important to build some digital inclusion leaders in all of these communities. So this digital navigator who's being hired will benefit from all of this training, so they're going to be prepared to either continue this program in the way that's best for their community or create the next program that makes the most sense for their digital inclusion ecosystem. So I'm very excited about the potential long-term effect in these communities. So our next slide, very simple question that we often get is who can apply for this? And that is going to be community-based organizations or local agencies that serve either rural or tribal and native communities and people. So if you're not sure if that's you, it's a pretty broad umbrella to fit those criteria. But if you're not exactly sure if your community fits, you can send me an email. We'll make sure my email address is shared. But we're also having an information session next week, which I think I'm getting ahead of myself to talk about. But there's some ways to make sure that that's you. But that's generally who we expect to apply for this program. So right now we are accepting letters of intent, which is a pretty brief interested in potentially doing this project. We try to make it very simple so it wouldn't take very much of your time. And that is a good way to find out if you are a good fit for the program. They are due on May 20th, and then on May 31st, organizations who have submitted that letter of intent, some of them will be invited to complete the full proposal, which will take more time to complete. We don't want to waste anybody's time if it's not a good fit for the program. So go ahead and complete that letter of intent if you are interested in the program, would be my recommendation. We're also having an informational webinar next week on May 10th, where you can get some more information about the specifics of what the grant provides and how to apply the application process. And we won't get into more of the specifics of the digital navigator model, but we did at a previous information session, which you can access on the website that is listed here. So in review, we're accepting letters of intent now through May 20th. On May 31st, some organizations who submitted letters of intent will be invited to submit a full proposal, which will be due at the end of June. And then in August, we'll do the kickoff for the grant and things will get rolling. I think that is everything we have to share. Davina, did you want to say anything about the grant specifically?
You know, if you need more information, I'm happy to provide that. If you want to share it out or have want an email to share out to your communities, if you know a good person who can take advantage of that, I can of course share that with you as well. So we're both great, you know, people to kind of help in this effort in terms of creating more awareness of this. It's brand new. As you might have noticed, we are brand new partners in terms of, you know, getting this message out, and we want to make sure we're targeting the right communities too. So yeah.
And I'll say this presentation is about digital navigators, so that's all we've talked about. But as a part of our new partnership, we really want to build a good system of support for digital inclusion practitioners in Indian country. And so if digital navigator is not a good fit for you, but you're interested or have questions for us about other digital inclusion work, you know, email Davina or I. We'll talk about it.
Absolutely.
I just saw one. Oh, go ahead, Jess. I think you started to talk.
Oh, no, I was getting ready to say if there were any questions or if you guys could pop those links and your emails and stuff into the chat, and everybody can get that. Does anybody in the breakout room have any questions for Abby or Davina? Just unmute yourselves and speak up or pop them in the chat and I can read them out. Okay, well, awesome. Thank you. Joan and Danielle, I think we're a little bit ahead of schedule. Thank you, Abby and Davina. That was great. And you've like caught up to this delay that we were experiencing today. So just like fantastic and professional. You guys are amazing. And so I see Danielle. Joan, are you here?
Yeah.
Here you are. So lovely to see you again.
Yes.
Okay.
So do you want us to go ahead and get started, or do we want to take a little bit of break?
That's an excellent idea. I know that we kind of rushed everybody in here. So let's see. Let's take a 5-minute break, everyone. If that's okay, does that give everybody enough time? Okay, so take a 5-minute break and meet back here and just come back to your computer at 3:45 Eastern. I'm in Mountain Standard or Mountain Daylight Time, so it's 1:40 for me. So just take a 5-minute break and we'll see you back here. And we'll hear from the lovely Joan and Danielle. Thanks, everybody. Okay, as everybody is hopefully coming back from our brief 5-minute break, just give a few more minutes here. We are preparing to hear a presentation from Native Nations Institute. And I just want to remind everybody that ATOM will send out an email with all the important links that we've gained over the past 2 days, as well as links to our recordings of this wonderful workshop for your use. And okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Joan Tamici. She is the Executive Director of Native Nations Institute, and her partner, Danielle Geraldo, who is the outreach specialist and a senior researcher also at Native Nations Institute. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Joan, are you there? Let me know.
I think you're muted.
Yes, I am, and I'm sorry. I didn't mute and put
Okay.
my video on, and I was talking away. Okay.
Now the floor is
That
yours.
we have in the digital world. To say Ascoli Omasoso Amyepti, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Jessica, for the introductions. We're gonna talk a little bit about how you advocate for libraries in tribal communities. I had the honor of participating in a large number of the summits, and actually all of the summits with ATOM over last year, where in each of the summits they raised the concerns about, you know, we're doing our job, but we need more support from tribal government, and we need more support from the tribal leaders individually to understand who we are and what we're about. And so we thought we'd put together this little workshop that would help you take a look at preparing how to engage in those kinds of considerations. And we're going to have a little exercise, and I don't know, we won't be able to complete it all and share, but we'll at least get moving forward at giving you some of those tools. I just wanted to quickly acknowledge that I am on the lands of the Tana-Atem Nation. I am currently living and residing in Tucson, Arizona, but I'm a Hopi citizen, so I come from northeastern Arizona. And the Native Nations Institute is a program at the University of Arizona, and all of our work is out in Indian country. We're all about strengthening Indigenous governance in all of the various areas. And so we have research and policy staff. We go out and provide educational programs that are non-credit as for professional development of working tribal professionals. We also have academic programs through the Indigenous Peoples Law and Policy Program. We have a large number of digital resources that I hope many of you will take a look at and utilize and maybe connect in your libraries. And then we do quite a bit of work out in the community. And because when COVID happened, we actually increased our interaction with nonprofit and for-profit organizations who work with Native communities. So we do work in those areas. Today, we're going to look very quickly at critical thinking, how you understanding change and advocacy, because sometimes we don't look at ourselves as being in those roles, but we definitely are. And each one of you that are on the line, that are online, actually are doing these things already. And then we're going to talk about your role as a librarian, and then we'll do a quick debrief and a Q&A portion of it. So I'm just going to move right along here. So one thing I want you to think about as we move forward is to think about, what do you hope to change in your library, in your organization, that you're going to need to advocate for? So I want you to keep that in the back of your mind. If you want to share any of those things in the chat box, we definitely will take a look at them. Be interesting to see where you're coming, you know, what kinds of issues you're being addressing right now. So please do so. And one other question that I have of you is if we might be able to take a screenshot, you know, towards the end, so we can capture some of this, and we'd like to be able to post it in our community. So when we did ATOM, did the Digital Inclusion Summit in October last year, there were a number of questions. People who came to that little breakout group said that their relationships with the tribal government were about average. And we had them ranked between 1 and 10, and they ranked in the 4 to 7 range. They also talked about what we also asked them, what kind of resources they might need to be able to overcome that would be helpful in advocating for their library or technology programs in terms of getting support from tribal governments. And so you can see the list here. And of course, money is always, funding is always going to be an issue. People were talking about the importance of getting community needs, so conducting an assessment. But you can see these next 3 bullets here that are really about creating long-term partnerships, relationship building with the tribal government, you know, and particularly to be able to as well utilize the funding and maybe collaborating with some of the tribal departments so that you can both support library and technology programs. But all of these things, and even the 4th one, addressed all about relationship building. So we're going to move that forward. So I want you to utilize the chat box. If you can tell us, you know, what do you think these definitions are? Then anybody want to offer, you know, in the chat, what do you think? What does change mean? What's critical thinking? What's advocacy? And you can use your own words. We're not looking for dictionary perfect definitions or anything like that. Anybody want to offer some ideas? No? Okay, well, we'll let you think about that a little bit longer. But here are some ideas. Then, you know, change really is, you know, to make or become different, right? Improvement, we got, and somebody listed, thank you, Tiffany, for providing that input there. And then critical thinking really is you to thinking from all kinds of angles. Advocacy, speaking up for the people you care about. These are all great responses. The critical thinking is really about helping, doing an objective analysis of facts, not emotions, to form a judgment. And so that they're logical and well thought out, so that you can be able to address some of the, maybe some of the arrows that might come your way from folks that aren't really that supportive. Advocacy then is that act or that process of supporting a particular cause or a proposal, you know, and these are all things that when you think about your libraries and in any kind of a program out there, this is probably something that you're already doing, but you're not consciously thinking about it in these ways. So in the work that we do, we call it Native Nation building, or either rebuilding our governments so that they're stronger. And oftentimes we don't think about the tribal government, but this is the entity that you're trying to seek support from. So you have to be able to look at it from their eyes as well. So to make the change, any kind of change, and you can apply this to a personal level, but we're going to talk about it in the library arena. So there are 4 basic steps. Go through assessment, you go through the solutions, you got to implement them once you've identified a solution, and you have to sustain it over time. The first one here, the assessment, really is figuring out, what do you want to change? So that was my question up front, right? What is it that you want to change? Is it their level of support? Is it their understanding of the library? Is, you know, what is it that you want to change to be able to garner that support from tribal government? And then it's what is, you know, identifying 2 things, what is and what isn't working. And sometimes it's, you know, hard to do that self-assessment, but, you know, in the end it'll pay off. And then how comprehensive a change do you need to make? Do you have to throw everything out, start over from scratch? Hopefully not, but that you will build upon what's working for you, you know, moving forward. So those are things that you have to figure out. What might be possible. Here, the other, when we move down towards solutions, it's where do you find ways, you know, the ideas to be able to solve some of the challenges. And this is all written in governance, but think about it as the governance of the library. So maybe there's things traditionally that you already were doing, but you're not applying it in the contemporary world that we're living in today. Maybe it's, you know, some of these great examples that have already been shared yesterday and today about what others are doing. So you borrow, their solutions. We have to remember that everything's not going to work 100%, but perhaps you might be able to take bits and pieces of it and then modify it a bit to meet your needs. And then, of course, we often forget that we ourselves have the answers, that we can invent those solutions to some of these challenges. It's just, having faith in ourselves and each other, that we know what the issues are, we have ideas, we can try it, and not being fearful of failing, because, everything has to be tried out at some point or another, but to create that kind of environment. And then the third thing has to be, once you've identified that, figuring out the implementation aspects of it, figuring out what needs to be done. And we talk about changing the conversation here. And what we're talking about there are things from the positive side, changing the conversation about who we are, the messaging that we provide, talking about it as a glass half full rather than, we're getting the acronym, I'm getting the message wrong. But anyway, thinking about it in a positive rather than in a negative, the pro versus the con. Maybe it's about, when we go through that assessment, changing our organization about how we do things. Do we need to stay open longer on the weekends when we have youth out there who need to, who need something to do? And maybe the library is a good place to do that. But thinking about the tribal government, system, because they work Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. So are there things that we have to do to adjust? And it's about mobilizing the community, because they're going to be your biggest cheerleaders out there. That community has to be able to see the value of the library, the services you provide, and who what you can provide and assist them in to be able to meet their needs. And it's also about what we call walking the sovereignty walk, which is, if you're going to go out there and say, we're doing X, Y, and Z, you have to be able to follow through on it too as well. And we like to quote, this tribal leader who said, this is more from a governmental standpoint, but it definitely applies to everything that we do in a tribe. If you want to act like a sovereign, so you want to be out there saying you're doing X, Y, and Z, you better act like it. You better follow through on it. That's basically his message to everybody. And then the fourth thing in terms of making change has to do with sustaining change over time. How do you do the nation building? If you want to be able to make these things last in the changes that you're making in your library, both the elected leaders and the citizens from the top and from the bottom, they have to understand the value of the libraries to be able to help move it forward and to be able to sustain it over time, even as you go through changes in who sits in the leadership positions, because that always occurs. The terms of office expire. Not everybody gets reelected. Sometimes you're dealing with a whole new crop of elected leaders who know nothing about your program. So how do you inform and how do you educate them? So this whole cycle really looks at listening to what the people, what the top and the bottom are saying, deliberating and going through that analysis of what might work, and then figuring out a plan, and then educating folks. And this is a constant circle that goes around, as we all know, moving it forward. So how do you make these changes? One, you have to get involved. You have to say, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to do this. You got to understand how advocacy works by doing, this is just another way of looking at it from the critical thinking lens, doing the analysis, the reasoning, the problem solving, the evaluation, and then the decision making. And of course, that keep going for around and around. And then you got to spend the time really thinking it through, identifying, what are my strengths? What are my skill sets? And if you don't have them, finding somebody on your staff, within the community, or maybe even externally, who can help you do some of the things that you're not equipped to do so. So I'm going to go through this very quickly in terms of this critical analysis. We use this for a number of purposes, but it could definitely be applied to here at the libraries. When you look at any kind of an issue, and in your case, it might be, say it was that you want to be able to maybe get your library institutionalized within the tribal government so that you get an annual allocation of, I don't know, maybe 100,000 or 200,000 or whatever the amount is. It's really addressing those same things that we learned in all of our old English classes, or at least in my day, of the who, what, where, when, why, and then the how. So it's really identifying those things about who's affected by the issue, who makes the decision on these, who has, and what is happening in our libraries, and what are our core issues or our core challenges? Do we have any possible solutions? What are your roles? Is this occurring, all of this occurring just in the community? Is it melding over? Maybe you're in a checkerboard reservation and it melds all over into the non-native areas. How is this being happen? How do you want it addressed by? Why is it important to the people involved, to your constituents, those patrons that come through your doors? Why is the library important? You got to be able to identify what these messages are, and then how people get affected, how the message gets delivered. Are we going to do it by word of mouth? Are we going to do it by public meetings? Are we going to do multimedia? What might we do? So that kind of gives you that quick glance of that. So we're going to now move towards preparing yourself for the advocacy, because this is a job that you, if you're a librarian in your tribal community, and I know not everybody may be from there, but whatever role that you're in, you probably know best about these things, and you yourself have an opinion, because each of us, when you think about it, has been exposed to some kind of an issue or challenge, an event that really caused us to have an opinion about something. And so this is really just intended, these next few slides are intended to help you think through them. So it's even things about stuff like, how do we talk about ourselves as a library? What do we tell the public? Is our message different to the general public, to an elected leader, and to what you tell maybe your significant other at home? You have to think about how are we talking about ourselves? How do others think about us? So this is where some of the surveys that have been discussed yesterday and today have, come into play. Here's the strengths, your skill sets, even things like, do you work well in a team environment, or do you like to work solo? Because those are all going to give you ideas of how you're going to move forward and how successful you may be. And then are there others that you could reach out to that support you, that are going to be your cheerleaders, that are going to mentor you if you don't have everything, or they need somebody to be able to talk to about these ideas, make sure they're not, that they can work. And then the challenges, identifying those challenges that you face, in a country, no matter how small or big we might be, we know that we can be really harsh on each other. And so, when you put yourself out in the public, people are, of course, are going to come out of the woodwork. They're going to have their own opinions about you. You have to also have that positive self-worth. You have to be confident about yourself that, you know what it is that you're doing, what you're doing, what your skill sets are, what you're trying to achieve. So these are all things that, a personal aspect comes into play here, because you got to be strong enough to, as a tribal leader once told me, to be able to take on those arrows that come towards your chest, and then those that come from the back too as well. You got to be able to withstand all of those things. And then figuring out, how am I going to overcome all of these challenges going forward? So when you talk about the libraries, think again, what's our core issue? Answer these questions to yourself. Who has the responsibility to address this issue? Do you have an advisory board or a council that maybe you consult with, or that you gain support? Do you have friends of the library or organization? Are you part of a department? What's your role in all of this stuff? And can you make change? Can change even occur? And what are the best ways to communicate this issue? These are all things that you need to think about. I'm going to move through the tribal governments, because if that's who you're seeking support from, you have to understand the tribal government. I remember when I worked for my tribe many decades ago, I came in really green, only knowing the department that I was employed in, and I didn't really fully understand all of the other departments. And it took me time to become aware of, where the linkages were. So you're going to want to know, how that's done, what's there and how decisions get made. And we don't all look the same. However, in the work that we do in Indian country, we've been finding more generally this model that we often see at state and national governments, where there's 3 branches. They have, the legislative makes the laws, the executive implements, judicial resolves the disputes. But many of us have local sub-governments. So like I'm Hopi, we have 12 villages. Those villages have a lot more authority than the tribal council in many cases. Some of you might, here's your library advisory board. Maybe there's outside entities who are revenue generators that can become sponsors of you. You're going to want to know those folks. And is there a traditional leadership in place that maybe you can garner support from that community? Think about all of the groups like the elders and the youth and so on. There's just so many options here. And then really figuring out who are the tribal decision makers. Is it the tribal council? Do you have to go through a legislative committee to be able to get to the council? Does it require a resolution? Can these things be made perhaps maybe by a decision made by the elected leaders, like your chair, president, governor, whatever they may be called? And I know in some of the smaller tribes, those elected officials have a significant amount of authority. And then probably the larger ones, you may end up having to go to the council level. So what does it take for a decision to get made? And then in many of the larger ones, we've noticed that they delegate that some authority to administrations, to a tribal department. Perhaps you might be in a department that's been delegated that authority because they have a large budget or whatever the case may be, that they can make those decisions without you having to go all the way up to the top. I do want to tell you that the people are going to play a critical role in all of this. If you get your advocates there at that level, the grassroots level, out in the communities, remember that they often elect, unless you happen to come from one of the traditional communities like in New Mexico, they're going to often elect who goes into council, who become the elected leaders. And so they have a lot of power and authority there. So you want to get them engaged. The other thing you need to think about too is outside of the tribal government are some of these components. Are there religious societies in place? Do you have a clan system or something like that? Or do you have villages and their leadership there? So who are those people? Are they engaged in all of these things? Are there local decision makers that are informal? This might be a matriarch of a family who has a lot of influence over how, what's going to happen in the community, whether they support a project or not. So these are all things that can be done. And again, I also want to encourage you to really think about involving the youth, because the youth today can have just been stepping up to the plate and trying to inform and educate leadership about what their needs are. And your library can definitely assist them in this area. So think about that as you move forward. So we put together a quick elevator worksheet. And Danielle, if you can put that out in the chat, that would be great. We can move you along with that. And I'm just going to go over it very quickly. We're not going to have time to give you dedicated time to sit to actually fill it out, but maybe perhaps you can, once you've downloaded it, you can start filling it in or trying to identify some of the responses. But pick an area. Maybe it's, support of your library, or maybe it's a specific project, whatever it might be. And tell us, what do you or your organization do? Who and how are the people that are affected by it? Is it a small population? Is it the entire reservation? talk about your impact. You know, if you were not in existence, what would people lose? And now that you're there, what do people gain from you? And again, the value. And we saw this, we definitely saw this within when COVID hit, you know, because people, we all went home from work. Schools were not in place. We have problems with bandwidth, you know, with internet service, with hardware, lack of electricity in my village, because we're a traditional village. We don't have any modern utilities. So these are all things that come into play. What's the value been of the library? And I would look at it too from the COVID, you know, the impact of COVID. What's your goal? What do you want to do? And what do you want to change? And what would be those key benefits if you were able to accomplish that goal or implement your solution? And then something that, you know, because we all have to fundraise, sometimes I have a hard time doing the ask. You know, traditionally, we may be taught not, you know, to directly ask for things, but in your case, you're going to have to, you know, say, I have to find a way that's culturally appropriate for me to ask somebody for assistance and for help. So it's then identifying, you know, who do I go to make that ask, and what's the best way to communicate with them. So if you can move that along, and I'm going to turn it over to Danielle.
Thanks, Joan. So we're hoping that you're able to complete that worksheet while we're going through the next two slides. And Joan, please feel free to jump in if I miss anything. When you're thinking about communicating your issue, whether it be through different mediums, here are some suggestions that we have put together and that we found as we do work out in Indian country. So there are obviously some different cues or ways that you can communicate both non-verbally. And if you can click the next one, it tells you that there might be some cues that you give away with your posture, your facial expression. There might be some verbal cues, your tone or pitch. My pitch often gets really high when I get excited about things. Written verbal communication is really important, especially during this time we've seen with COVID. A lot of things went virtual, so we had to be able to clearly communicate what we want, what our expectations were, and what we were trying to get out of that particular partnership or relationship. And then there's visual. There's a lot of exciting things or exciting ways to communicate an issue via social media. Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube are all great ways, and the younger folks will use TikTok. I don't have a TikTok account, but these are all great ways to communicate or to advocate on the behalf of what you're passionate about within your organization. And if you can go to the next slide, Joan. Here are some things that you can think about when you're communicating the 7 C's of effective communication. So completeness, right? So are you providing all the necessary information? Are you being concise, right? Are you getting straight to the point? Considerate, are you including other folks and thinking about how other folks might interpret that particular message? Concreteness, or there's a level of specificity within your message, clarity, courtesy, and then are you conveying correct factual information? Are some tips to consider as you're communicating. And so I hope we have some time, Joan, right, to do a little bit of opening the floor to you all, that you have had time to work on your elevator pitch a little bit. And we wanted to see if we have some volunteers to discuss. You know, tell us about your organization, tell us what you what your organization provides, who's your audience, who's being affected, what kind of impact do you have, what's your goal, and then your benefits, and of course that ask. What is it that you're asking? Do we have any volunteers?
Danielle?
Yep.
I just realized that I flew through all of my slides really quickly, much faster than I thought. And we actually have a little bit of time for folks if you want to take. Should we give you 5 minutes to see if you want to fill out that form, or are people ready to just engage and by looking at the form, be able to do an elevator pitch to that tribal leader that you might have met down the hallway or down at the grocery store, and you had a chance to be able to tell them about your program? Any thoughts out there?
While everybody is thinking and hopefully working on those worksheets, I just want to say that this is such a fantastic resource and that I know that it's going to be super helpful. This was, it came up in the summits that this was a big issue, with how to advocate and, communicate effectively to that tribal leader. So I just wanted to pipe in and just not let it be, dead air happening right now. This is just amazing work. Thank you.
Is this, do people have questions about what we just threw at you? Hopefully it came, it made sense to you. Does it apply to your situation? You can turn on your audio or your video if you want as well. We have a quiet group this afternoon. Okay, thank you.
So Tiffany, do you see Tiffany's comment? Okay.
Yeah, about how it doesn't apply currently. Keep it in your pocket. Yeah,
Yes.
we can at least have an elevator pitch about your next job, potentially a project that you're working on. If you're a parent, there's always something that you're or fundraising for. Thank you, Madison, for the comment about it not being directly applicable right now, but yes, thank you. Do we have any, how many of you can, perhaps maybe you can tell us who's out in the audience in terms of, do we have folks from tribal communities? Tell us what tribes you represent. Oh, we have Lumbee.
I can chime in on a situation that I'm going through currently.
Okay.
My name is Deidre Dallas, and I'm currently located on the Hopi Reservation. I will be graduating in May with my MLIS from the University of Arizona, so I am here on Hopi, transitioning back home, trying to find work out here. Last semester, I had completed my internship at the Hopi Public Library, and this workshop is really helpful because I feel like out here there's not a lot of support for the public library. And the library currently sits under the education department, which I feel like it should sit under like a public services department instead. And we had currently, when I was an intern, we had applied for a few grants, and those grants got funded. And those grants were received earlier this year, but they've been sitting there at the tribe for a while. Yeah, so we're still waiting. And I guess too, as I volunteer there now just to kind of keep my foot in the door. But, I like this chart that you have up, the courtesy, respect for audience. I don't want to overstep my boundaries, with what's going on. I kind of don't know what to do or how to approach this. A friend was actually just telling me, like, have you talked to any of the council members? And I haven't. But yeah, I think that's just kind of the situation that we're facing right now. I know funding is a big thing, but I don't know. I almost don't know what to do.
Well, I'm sure that there are other folks that may have encountered the same kind of a situation. And I know that, having been a department director before, one of the things that you might want to start with is to first go to the department and talk about it. I don't know who the first person up above the libraries was, the supervisory over the library programs, and talk about, the fact that you're an educated Hopi citizen who can come back and provide skills to the community, and that you want to help, that you're volunteering your help because you want to see good library services out in the community, and then working your way up there. Council members can have a lot of influence over things, but sometimes that council member you got to make sure that the message you're sending to them is accurate, and what it is that, what message you are sending to them is well defined, because they may interpret it as you being unhappy, and they may come back upon the department in a negative way. I've been at the receiving end of it, so I know that can happen. So you need to, I would encourage you to first try to work within the system, going up the chain of command, as they call it. And then if that doesn't work, maybe you can talk to this with other community members, maybe even your own family that, live on the reservation. See if anybody has any other suggestions there. Maybe it comes from within the village government. If you have not all of the village, I don't know what village you come from, but not all of them have a formal governmental system in place. But that might be another potential opportunity. But I'm sure that folks have also encountered this. And does anybody have any other suggestions for it?
Hello, my name is Leonardo Wasley. I'm Nenana, Alaska. I'm Yupik Eskimo. I'm on lands of the Dene. I was born in Bethel, so Nenana is quite a ways from my ancestral homeland. But I just wanted to kind of add a few things about interacting. One of the things I try to do to sort of create some type of connection is to say, I'm trying to do this out of respect and honor and, of both our cultural traditions and, respect for, your position. And those are the things I like to try to do. And if I do act in a manner that might be disrespectful, I certainly like to know right away. So I always try to create that, connection through, mutual respect and then, certainly, following up and, interacting and giving feedback, is really important. And, trying to keep opinions or anything out of it and just keep things very factual. It, it gives a lot of weight. And so, and I certainly know what it's like to, hit a point and not know what to do. And, that's, sometimes, stopping for a minute and just not even thinking about it, coming back the next day and just, hit the brainstorming and just start, really dialing in like, I wonder if this is something I can do personally, or do I need the, is there another group that is in our community that has a similar interest that is maybe not necessarily tied to our, tribal government, but, it's works with our tribal government. So, there's partners and, just, I think brainstorming and keeping options open and being flexible, with time and, giving people options that, to kind of fill in the blanks, that gives a lot of help. So anyways, I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Leonardo. You brought up some really great points, and I want to emphasize two things. One about being non-emotional, because when you get challenged, you want to be able to respond with facts. You know, we service X number of individuals who come from every part of our reservation. You know, we provide, you know, we've had, you know, elders come in, we've had youth come in, the schools come in, blah, blah, blah. You're going to want to have all of those things, you know, as part of your, if we were in a war, what would they be? your arsenal of that you're going to go out and do this with. So you want to make sure that you have the facts and focus it on that. You got to stay away from who they don't like working in the library or whatever, you know, how somebody was treated, but really focus in on the facts that you can rely upon. And those are things that are really, you know, many of you are writing grant reports. You're providing that data already. So some of you may have surveys where you're collecting that information. If they've given you ideas, you can go back and say, well, you know, our survey that we just completed last summer told us that the community is really interested in X. And so those are things that you can utilize from there too as well. And then the second thing that I wanted to emphasize again from Leonardo's comments were that really think about who are your allies within the community. You may find that a program out there or an individual who has a lot of influence could be your best ally, but you never even thought of them in that role. So think about, you know, do that scan of the community. You know, who's out there, who's doing something similar that maybe might be on a different topic, but the process is the same because you can learn from each other. Or maybe you saw maybe a community-wide effort that came out of COVID and you like the way that people were informed and educated, serviced, you know, how questions got dealt with. Maybe there are bits and pieces of that you can replicate. It's all again about learning from others, you know, and refining it to meet your needs. So so thank you so much for those comments, Leonardo. I also wanted to just make sure we went back to some of the comments that were being made. You know, follow-up emails are always really great. I encourage you to document those kinds of things where it's applicable. You may be in a community where one-on-one and verbal communications are what's culturally appropriate. But even then, go back to your office, document the date, the time, what you talked to them, what kind of response you got from them, because that'll help you be able to compile some of that documentation of where you're at and, you know, whether people support you or not. You'll have it for, if nothing else, for your own records. Utilizing your indigenous language and terminology and examples. Those are all really great ideas. And of course, always, you know, being respectful of the individual, their position, their time, always being respectful there, even about their diversity, perhaps in their ideas. You know, maybe they might not be supportive. So trying to find a way to be able to identify something that they might be able to support. This is where knowing your audience really comes into play. Maybe that individual, I can think of many times in my days when I worked for the tribe, when, you know, there would be one or two individuals who just, everything that I presented just seemed to just say no in their body language and verbally. And I had to find out a little bit more about, you know, what makes that person tick? What are they interested in? And so that I might be able to find that hook to be able to get them to at least open up their mind a little bit, listen a little bit more. So there's a lot of people interactive skills that you need to be attuned to, that you have to be able to think about and work through. And you don't have to do it all by yourself. You know, if you have somebody within your, if they're staff, if they're friends, those are all individuals who can help brainstorm, who can help you brainstorm some of these ideas. So anyway, those are all things that I wanted to make sure I covered. Naysayers, Danielle, I don't know if you want to go on that thread.
No, Joan, I think we're at time. So I just wanted to connect with Jess to see if we're good to maybe just do a little closeout thoughts.
Sure.
Absolutely. We are going to close in about 7 minutes. So.
Okay, great. So there are a couple of things that I wanted to just reiterate. The fact that when we think about libraries, we don't really think about it, or cultural centers, as being very political, but when we are advocating to elected leaders, it can be. And sometimes I know that Tiffany mentioned, the lobby community. If we're talking about allocation of resources and Prospect, Pembroke, there's going to be a lot of politics around that. And it's important to understand who those people that are involved in, and just know that sometimes it's just be political. And we just want to offer an opportunity just to see if you all have questions, and we'll just do a little bit of closing and wrap up in this short amount of time.
Well, it doesn't, it looks like people are talked out. I hope that you found this useful. I hope that you're gonna find a way to utilize the form that we sent you, and you can always tweak it to meet the needs that you have. Maybe take it out, change the words or whatever. It was just a template to get you started. So I wish you lots of luck in helping to think about how you're gonna, what message it is that you send out to the community, and then how best to be engaged with those decision makers within your community. So good luck, and we're happy to be here. And I think we'll provide our email addresses in case you need to, or actually, if you just go to our website at nni.arizona.edu, you should be, and here's our email addresses. So thank you again for joining us today.
Yes, thank you so much. This has been outstanding. I know everybody, it's like our second day and everybody's kind of like sitting on Zoom for hours after hours, but I think that this is going to spark some great conversations and great work in the future. I have total faith in everyone that's here today. So I just wanted to again thank Abby and Davida for their presentation on the National Digital Navigator program. And a big thank you to Joan and Danielle for this presentation on how to advocate for libraries in your tribal communities. Also, thank you to all of our participants. We love having you here. And I think we can leave the room, or we can hang out until it automatically boots us back out into the main room. So
anybody willing to share their photos so that we can take a picture, screenshots? No, they're ready to go. Oh, some of you, yay, 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 yay. Okay, Danielle, I hope you're taking the screenshot. I'm not.
beautiful people. Thank you.
Thank you so much for.
Thank you for the advice. This is, I think we can all find something that you said that will help us in now and in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Joan Kerr. I like your name, first of all, so let's say that. Nice name. I don't belong to a tribe, but I belong to the tribe of humanity. Maybe that will give me an in. I used to say I'm a child of the universe, but I could say I'm a child of the tribe too. However, I'm hoping to speak later in the open forum. but I really loved your workshop. It was so spot on, and really I learned a lot. So thank you for that. I just wanted to verbally thank you before we went into the open forum. I learned a lot.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. We got 2 minutes left.
Did you do the beading that's in the background photo of your?
No, it's actually stock. It's a stock image that we utilize for all of our materials here at the Native Nations Institute. I'm not that gifted, but however, Davida, however, is a gifted beader.
It is a gift indeed.
Joan, I was hoping you'd wear your beaded A.
Oh, shoot, I didn't even think about it, but I got a lot of compliments on it at the last event at the
Nice.
higher levels of the university. I need to talk to you about it.
So I'm taking orders. Just kidding.
Basically, that's what it was about. That you could sell them.
Well, I am looking forward to hopefully seeing all of you at the ATOM conference this year in Temecula, California. It'll be just so great to kind of get off Zoom and meet you and interact with you in person.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
I see that there's someone named Alice Goff. I was wondering if it was related to Bob Goff.
Alex?
Might have stepped away or like went back out
Yeah.
into the main group.
No, he was a great friend of mine. He used to come, I'm from Canada, and he used to come to Canada and visit us. So I just wondered.
All right, so we got about 50 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.